The absolute light of the Sun King cast the darkest and most impenetrable shadows, hiding ancient enchantments, whispered poisons, and desperate nocturnal rituals right beneath the heavily gilded throne of Versailles. This is the story of how absolute power bred absolute madness, and how the brightest and most magnificent illusion in the entire world silently crumbled in the quiet, unseen hours of the night. Welcome back to the channel today. Tell me your city and what time it is where you are. Then get comfortable and let us drift into tonight's story. If you are a regular listener, do not forget to subscribe for more relaxing history. Hey friend, take a moment to simply settle in and exist exactly where you are. Adjust your pillow until it feels just right beneath your head, supporting your neck perfectly. Pull that blanket a little closer to your chin, feeling the soft texture of the fabric against your skin. Let the heavy weight of the waking world slip away from your tired shoulders, allowing your body to sink deep into the supportive mattress beneath you. Unclench your jaw. Let your breathing slow down, matching the quiet rhythm of the evening. We are travelling far away from this modern night, journeying back across the centuries to the city of Paris in the year 1679. We are stepping into a space entirely untouched by the brilliant golden sun that defines this glorious era. We are slowly walking into the Chambre Ardente, known in the common tongue as the burning room. It is a secret tribunal established by the king himself, hidden away deep within the stone architecture, far from the prying eyes and bright laughter of the royal court. There are no windows in this heavy room. The walls are completely draped in thick, dark velvet curtains that absorb every stray sound, muffling the footsteps and silencing the echoes of the outside world. The only source of illumination comes from thick, pale beeswax candles resting in heavy iron holders scattered across the tables. The warm yellow flames dance a slow and hypnotic rhythm, casting long, wavering shadows across the cold stone floor. The air is remarkably thick and still, carrying the comforting scent of melting wax, old settling dust, and the damp chill of a space that never sees the light of day. At the very centre of the room sits a solid oak table, its dark wooden surface polished smooth by years of slow, deliberate use. Behind it sits Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie, the first Lieutenant General of Police of Paris. He is a man of absolute rationality, a sharp mind anchored completely in logic, evidence, and the rule of law. He sits perfectly still in a room that is solely dedicated to untangling the chaotic webs of irrational fear and hidden magic. The soft candlelight catches the sharp, calm lines of his face and the steady, unhurried movement of his hands as he turns the pages of a massive, thick, leather-bound ledger. The parchment is heavy, rough and fibrous to the touch, and filled edge to edge with dark iron gall ink. Every slow stroke of the quill captured in this ledger holds the whispered confessions of those who dwelled in the shadowy, forgotten alleys of the city, trading in illicit herbal powders and quiet, unspoken remedies. As we settle into the quietest corner of this hidden chamber, watching the thin ribbon of smoke from the candles curl toward the dark ceiling, I want to gently remind you of the safe space we are creating together tonight. This is an ambient historical narrative curated exclusively for relaxation, sleep assistance, and educational entertainment. Derived from authentic primary records and antique chronicles, the prose has been softly adapted to foster a soothing, restful atmosphere. You do not need to solve the mysteries hidden within these ancient pages. You only need to listen to the slow turning of the heavy parchment and the steady, grounding presence of the past. The silence inside the burning room is not empty. It is a heavy, almost physical presence woven from the thick threads of the black velvet curtains and the solid, unyielding stone of the walls. Sitting at the massive oak table, Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie embodies this profound stillness. He does not rush, He does not sigh. His breathing is a slow, measured tide, rising and falling with the deep, quiet concentration of a man entirely devoted to untangling truth from deception. The heavy wool of his dark coat absorbs the faint chill of the underground air, keeping him warm and anchored in his seat. The delicate white lace at his collar provides the only stark contrast in a room swallowed by shadows, resting softly against his neck as he leans slightly forward over the massive ledger. Beneath his steady gaze lies the parchment. It is not the smooth, bright paper of a modern age, but rather heavy, cured animal skin, prepared slowly and deliberately by the hands of skilled artisans. If you were to run your fingertips across its surface, you would feel the subtle, raised imperfections, the gentle grain of the hide, and the natural grooves where the ink pools and settles. The pages are thick and stiff, holding the faint, earthy scent of the bindery. When Lorraine turns a page, it does not flutter or tear. It moves with a slow, deliberate weight, creating a soft, hollow sound as it settles flat against the left side of the heavy book. It is the sound of time being recorded, locked away, and preserved in the quiet dark. Beside the ledger rests a heavy pewter inkwell, its dull grey surface reflecting the wavering yellow light of the nearby candles. Inside this small vessel sits the iron gall ink, dark as a starless sky. The scent of the ink is sharp and slightly metallic, grounding the room in the practical reality of administrative work. It mingles in the air with the rich, sweet fragrance of the melting beeswax candles, creating a unique and deeply comforting aroma that fills the enclosed space. The candles themselves are thick and sturdy, burning slowly and cleanly. Small beads of molten wax pool around the dark wicks before tracing slow, warm paths down the sides of the pillars, solidifying into smooth, translucent droplets on the oak table. Lorraine holds a long, pale goose feather quill between his fingers. The tip has been expertly sharpened with a small silver knife, splitting the delicate point to hold just the right amount of ink. Though he is mostly reading tonight, occasionally he dips the quill into the heavy pewter well to make a small, precise notation in the margins. The sound of the quill against the rough parchment is a quiet, rhythmic scratching. It is a steady, soothing vibration that fills the heavy silence of the room. Up and down, curving and stopping, the nib of the pen leaves a permanent trail of black upon the pale surface. The scratching sound is hypnotic, like a small dry branch gently brushing against a window pane in a quiet breeze. It is the sound of order being restored, of chaotic fragments being carefully stitched together by a rational mind. He reads the words written before him with absolute neutrality. There is no shock in his dark eyes, no revulsion, and no fear. He is a man of the law, a builder of structure in a world that often leans toward disorder. The pages he studies contain the whispered secrets of the city, the hidden transactions of the poor, and the desperate, captured forever in neat, flowing script. He reads about crushed roots, dried herbs, and small unnamed ceramic vials traded in the damp cobblestone alleys of Paris. He reads of soot-stained hearths and hidden doorways. Yet, in this heavily draped room, those distant, chaotic realities are reduced to nothing more than dry ink on quiet pages. The chaos of the outside world cannot penetrate the thick velvet curtains. Here, there is only logic, quiet observation, and the slow turning of the pages. The Lieutenant General shifts his weight slightly in the heavy wooden chair. The solid oak creaks just a fraction, a deep, resonant sound that settles quickly back into the silence. He reaches out a steady hand to trim the wick of the nearest candle with a pair of small iron snips. The flame dips for a brief second, dimming the room, before flaring up brighter and warmer than before, casting a golden glow across his calm, focused features. He is entirely present in this moment, entirely focused on the slow, methodical work of his office. He is surrounded by darkness, yet he works methodically by the light of a single, steady flame, seeking nothing more than the simple, unadorned truth hidden within the fibres of the ancient parchment. The night outside the palace walls may be cold and vast, but inside this room there is only the comforting warmth of the candle, the familiar scent of old paper, and the reassuring rhythm of a quiet mind at work. Let the rhythm of his careful breathing guide your own, slow and steady, sinking deeper into the quiet safety of the night. Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie was a man built entirely of structure and quiet discipline. Before he became the Lieutenant General of Police, the vast city of Paris was a labyrinth of dark, winding streets, lit only by the sporadic fires of the impoverished and the pale, unreliable glow of the moon. It was La Reynie who brought the very first lanterns to the thoroughfares, hanging them securely from heavy iron hooks, casting away the deep shadows where thieves and fortune-tellers once thrived unchecked. In a world that often surrendered to superstition and whispered fears, he was a steady, unyielding beacon of reason. He believed firmly in the tangible, the visible, and the measurable. Magic, in his calm and analytical mind, was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated performance meant to separate desperate people from their hard-earned coins. As he sits in the heavily draped Chambre Ardente, he categorizes the testimonies with absolute precision. He does not view the confessions of spells and enchantments as supernatural events. Instead, he sees them as a complex puzzle of human nature, a quiet study in the lengths to which lonely or ambitious hearts will go when they feel powerless in a vast kingdom. His fingers, cool and steady, slide across the rough surface of the parchment, tracing the dark lines of ink. He picks up a small brass paperweight, a simple heavy dome of polished metal, and places it squarely on the corner of the latest page to keep the stiff animal hide perfectly flat. The solid metal is cool to the touch, grounding him in the physical reality of the room. The soft clinking sound it makes against the oak table is sharp and clean, a sound of perfect order interrupting the silent tales of chaos. He reaches into the deep pocket of his dark wool coat and retrieves a silver pocket watch. It is a heavy, intricate piece of craftsmanship, smooth and perfectly round, warmed slightly by the heat of his own body. He clicks the protective cover open with his thumb, the quiet metallic snap echoing softly in the enclosed space. The face of the watch is a pristine white enamel, adorned with delicate black Roman numerals painted with incredible care. The tiny, intricate gears inside click with a steady, rhythmic heartbeat, a constant and reassuring mechanical pulse. It is the sound of time marching forward in a predictable, organized line, a complete contrast to the chaotic, untethered rituals described in the pages before him. He watches the thin metal hand sweep across the dial, marking the passage of another minute in the deep quiet of the night. As we sit here with him, listening to the steady ticking of the watch and the comforting rustle of thick paper, I invite you to settle even deeper into your own space. If you are finding comfort in this quiet journey into the past, consider subscribing to the channel or leaving a gentle like on the video so we can continue to explore these peaceful histories together. Let the slow, rhythmic sounds of the room anchor you. Allow your muscles to relax further into your mattress, feeling completely supported, warm, and entirely safe. La Reynie gently closes the silver watch, the cover clicking shut with a final satisfying sound, and slips it back into the warm depths of his coat pocket. He turns his attention to a fresh stack of documents resting on his left. These are the specific transcripts of recent interrogations, recorded by his scribes in the damp stone cells of the city prisons. He smooths his hand over the top sheet, feeling the subtle differences in the texture of the paper. This particular parchment is slightly thinner, bearing the faint, dusty scent of the underground archives, mingled with the sharp tang of fresh ink. He reads the words not with judgment, but with a deep, methodical curiosity. He is looking for patterns, for the hidden threads that connect one desperate customer in the poor districts to another. The flames of the beeswax candles continue their slow, hypnotic dance, casting a warm golden hue over the stark white lace of his collar and the dark, heavy fabric of his coat. The room remains completely still, perfectly insulated from the cold winds blowing across the slate roofs of Paris far above. There is a profound comfort in watching a mind like his at work, a mind that does not falter in the face of the unknown, but simply categorizes it, names it, and files it neatly away. He is a quiet guardian of logic, sitting peacefully in a room draped in velvet, building a fortress of reason out of ink and paper. The deep, heavy silence of the Chambre Ardente wraps around him like a thick blanket, keeping the fears of the outside world firmly at bay. Let that same heavy, comforting silence wrap around you tonight, shielding you from the worries of the day, leaving only the warmth of your room and the steady, peaceful rhythm of your own breathing. Resting at the far edge of the solid oak table, just beyond the immediate golden pool of the candlelight, sits a modest wooden box. It is a simple thing, crafted from unpolished pine, its edges worn smooth by the handling of many different guards and clerks. Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie extends his right hand and gently rests his fingers against the brass latch. He lifts it slowly. The small metal hinges let out a quiet, subdued squeak that barely ripples through the heavy velvet silence of the room. Inside this box, resting upon a soft bed of dry, yellowed straw, are the physical remnants of the city's hidden trade. These are the confiscated items brought up from the deep, damp holding cells of the Parisian guardhouses, the tangible proof of the spells and remedies whispered about in the poorest districts. He reaches into the box and carefully extracts a small unglazed ceramic vial. It is no larger than his thumb, a humble rounded vessel baked in a common kiln. The clay is rough and porous to the touch, coloured in a muted, earthy shade of brown that speaks of simple river mud and common fire. He turns it slowly between his thumb and forefinger. The sound of his skin brushing against the dry, fired earth is a soft, rhythmic whisper, like a dry leaf scraping gently against a stone step. The mouth of the vial is sealed tight with a piece of carved cork, pressed firmly into the narrow neck. He does not pull the stopper. He merely holds the object, feeling its modest weight. To the untrained, fearful eye of a superstitious mind, this small jar might hold incredible invisible power, but to the lieutenant general it is nothing more than baked mud and simple cork, an object completely devoid of magic, holding only the desperate intentions of whoever purchased it. He sets the ceramic vial down on the polished oak. It makes a dull, hollow thud that settles instantly into the quiet. Next, his fingers find a small bundle of dried flora resting in the straw. It is a collection of brittle roots, withered stems, and pale, faded petals, all bound tightly together with a piece of coarse, frayed twine. As he lifts it into the light of the beeswax candle, a single tiny fragment of a dried leaf detaches from the bundle and floats silently down, landing softly upon the heavy leather cover of his ledger. The bundle carries a deep, earthy aroma. It smells of crushed sage, dried mint, old bark, and the damp, heavy scent of autumn soil. As this fragrance rises into the still air of the room, mingling with the sweet, clean scent of the melting beeswax, it brings to mind a quiet, forgotten corner of a garden resting peacefully under a grey, overcast sky. The testimonies written in the iron gall ink before him detail the lives of the men and women who sold these very items. They were ordinary people, fortune-tellers, impoverished alchemists, and street herbalists who worked by the dim, flickering light of small hearth fires in the crowded, winding alleys of the city. When questioned by the city guard in the lower levels of the prison, they spoke quietly, their words echoing softly off the ancient, weeping stones. Those underground holding cells were vast and cold, smelling perpetually of damp moss and the slow-moving waters of the nearby river. Yet in their quiet confessions there was no grand dark sorcery to be found. There was only the simple mundane reality of poverty, and the quiet act of selling small pouches of crushed herbs to those seeking a sliver of hope or a moment of control in a vast, overwhelming world. Lorraine places the bundle of dried roots gently beside the ceramic vial. He looks at these ordinary objects with a calm, philosophical neutrality. He understands that the true danger does not lie within the brittle leaves or the unglazed clay. The danger lies in the minds of the people who believe in them, in the grand, sweeping illusions they construct around these simple, physical things. The magic they peddled was an absolute fiction, but the human desire that fueled the trade was undeniably real. With a slow, measured breath, he picks up his sharpened quill once more. He dips the delicate point into the heavy pewter inkwell, ready to record another quiet truth. The scratching of the feather upon the parchment resumes a steady, comforting rhythm that anchors the room, proving that even the most chaotic mysteries can be quietly disassembled, piece by piece, until only the quiet, harmless truth remains. Beneath the dry bundles of faded roots and the simple unglazed vials at the bottom of the wooden box, the steady hands of Gabriel Nicola de Lorraine discover something entirely out of place. As his fingers brush against the very bottom of the pine container, they do not find rough clay or coarse twine. Instead, they meet the remarkably smooth, cool surface of pressed linen paper. He gently pulls the folded document from the shadows of the box and brings it into the warm golden pool of the candlelight. The difference is immediately apparent. This is not the heavy, uneven parchment of the city clerks, nor is it the cheap, fragile paper used by the street vendors. It is a thick, high-quality weave, the kind of paper that feels almost like soft fabric between the fingertips. He turns the folded page over, holding it lightly between his thumb and forefinger. As the soft light of the beeswax candle shines through the fibres, a faint, elegant watermark becomes visible, trapped perfectly within the weave of the paper. It is a mark of luxury, a quiet testament to wealth and privilege. As he brings the document closer to his desk to lay it flat, a new scent gently disturbs the heavy, dusty air of the Chambre Ardente. It is incredibly subtle, yet completely distinct from the damp earth and melting wax. It is the faint, lingering fragrance of pressed jasmine flowers and sweet almond oil. It is a delicate, floral perfume that speaks of pristine gardens, silk dresses, and long, quiet afternoons spent in beautifully appointed dressing rooms. It is a scent that absolutely does not belong in the cold stone depths of a Parisian holding cell. Lorraine smooths the linen paper flat against the solid oak table. The sound it makes is a crisp, clean rustle, a sharp contrast to the dull thud of the heavy animal hide ledger. He reaches for his silver snips and carefully trims the candle wick once more, ensuring the light is perfectly bright and steady before he begins to read. The ink on this page is not the fading brownish black of cheap soot. It is a rich, deep indigo, applied with a remarkably fine and well-maintained quill. The handwriting is elegant and practiced, flowing in graceful loops and sharp, precise angles. It is a ledger of transactions, a quiet accounting kept by the herbalists of their most profitable clients. As the Lieutenant General slowly reads down the column of names, the entire landscape of his investigation begins to subtly shift. The addresses listed beside the purchased remedies no longer point to the winding, nameless alleys of the impoverished districts. Instead, they guide the eye toward the grand, sweeping boulevards of the upper city. The titles attached to the names transform from ordinary citizens to baronesses, to countesses, and to the highest ladies of the royal court. The thread he has been patiently untangling all evening has suddenly stretched far beyond the muddy cobblestone of Paris. It is winding its way out of the city, reaching across the miles of manicured countryside, and pointing directly toward the towering, gilded gates of Versailles. Yet, as this profound realization settles into the quiet space of the room, Lorraine does not alter his posture. His breathing remains completely steady, rising and falling in the exact same rhythmic pattern as before. The heavy silver pocket watch resting inside his dark wool coat continues its constant, reassuring ticking, entirely unmoved by the names written on the page. In his purely logical mind, this revelation brings no shock, only a deep philosophical understanding. He sees clearly that the heavy velvet curtains of his chamber cannot block out the simple truth that human frailty knows no boundaries of wealth or status. The same desperate need for certainty that drives a poor baker to purchase a handful of dried sage also drives a lady draped in velvet and pearls to seek out the very same quiet illusions. The magnificent palace of Versailles, with its perfect geometric gardens, its towering walls of mirrors, and its absolute abundance of light, is just as vulnerable to fear and insecurity as the darkest alleyway. Desperation simply wears a finer cloth and smells of sweet jasmine instead of wood smoke. With calm deliberation, Lorraine dips his quill into the heavy pewter inkwell. He begins to transcribe the names of the nobility into his own heavy leather ledger. The scratching of the feather resumes its hypnotic rhythmic journey across the page. Justice and logic do not differentiate between coarse wool and fine silk. He simply continues his work, building his quiet fortress of truth one careful letter at a time. As he focuses on his steady task, allow yourself to focus on the heavy warmth of your blanket. Let the soft floral scent of jasmine fade from your mind, replaced only by the fresh, clean scent of your own pillow, wrapping you in absolute safety and deep, unbroken rest. The final piece of linen paper rests quietly at the very bottom of the stack, slightly concealed by the shadows cast by the heavy pewter inkwell. Gabriel Nicolas de Lorraine slides it toward the centre of the oak table. The movement is slow and deliberate. The paper makes a soft dragging sound against the polished wood. As the golden light of the beeswax candle washes over the elegant indigo script, the air inside the heavily draped room seems to grow thicker, settling with a profound, almost physical weight upon his shoulders. He does not gasp. He does not widen his eyes. He merely stops the movement of his stares at the perfectly formed letters spelling out a single name. It is a name that commands absolute deference across the vast kingdom of France. It is the name of a woman who resides not in the damp, winding alleys of Paris, but at the very pinnacle of light and luxury. Madame de Montespan. She is the undisputed favourite of the Sun King, a woman who has walked the gilded halls of Versailles, enveloped in the absolute power of royal affection for more than a decade. The ink that forms her name on this illicit ledger is identical to the ink that forms the names of the desperate street vendors. Yet the implication of her presence on this list shifts the entire foundation of the investigation. The silence of the Chambre Ardente deepens, transforming into a heavy, suffocating blanket. The realization is immense, yet Lorraine processes it with the steady, unyielding calm of a mathematician observing a flaw in a grand equation. If the most powerful woman in the king's inner circle, a woman who sleeps mere footsteps from the throne, is seeking out the hidden remedies of the city's poorest alchemists, then the magnificent illusion of Versailles is already crumbling from within. The shadow has not merely crept up to the palace gates, it has taken root in the very centre of the sun. The absolute light of the king has blinded him to the darkness growing in his own private chambers. Lorraine takes a slow, deep breath, letting the cool air of the stone room fill his lungs before exhaling quietly. He reaches for his silver pocket watch one last time, feeling its solid grounding weight in the palm of his hand. The mechanical ticking continues its faithful, uninterrupted rhythm, a soothing reminder. that no matter how grand the secrets of the court may be, time continues its steady, peaceful march forward. He carefully closes the heavy leather ledger, the thick pages settling together with a muted, comforting thud that echoes softly against the velvet curtains. The initial phase of his quiet work in the dark is complete. As we prepare to leave the heavy stillness of this underground room and journey toward the dazzling, dangerous halls of Versailles, it brings peace to know that the stories we explore are carefully crafted for your rest. This content was generated with the assistance of specialized artificial intelligence models and subsequently analyzed, refined, and curated by the research team at Sleepy History with Karry. All rights reserved. Let the heavy velvet curtains close entirely on the worries of the waking world. Sink deeper into the comforting warmth of your bed. Breathe in the quiet safety of your room, and let the gentle current of history carry you further into the peaceful embrace of the night. We leave the cold, damp stone of the underground tribunal and travel toward the setting sun, moving gently into the vast, manicured landscape of Versailles. The air here is entirely different. It is no longer heavy with the scent of melting beeswax and ancient dust. Instead, the atmosphere is thick with the intoxicating fragrance of blooming orange trees in large silver planters and the sweet, heavy perfume of crushed tuberose. We are stepping into the private apartments of Madame de Montespan, a space carefully designed to be the very centre of the universe. The walls are covered in rich crimson damask, woven with intricate threads of pure gold that catch and hold the dying light of the afternoon. Every surface is an overwhelming display of wealth and absolute privilege. Yet, beneath this overwhelming beauty, a deep and quiet anxiety is taking root. She stands completely still near the centre of the room. The fabric of her gown is a masterpiece of heavy, stiff silk, dyed in a brilliant shade of deep azure. As she shifts her weight ever so slightly, the fabric moves against itself. The sound it makes is a continuous, dry rustling, much like the gentle whisper of autumn leaves blowing across a polished stone path. The gown is heavy, constructed with countless layers of fine linen and stiffened bodices pulling her down, anchoring her to the perfectly arranged parquet floor. The intricate patterns of the wooden floorboards, polished to a mirror shine with beeswax, reflect the hem of her gown as she paces slowly toward the tall arched windows. Every painting on your wall legally becomes, as we watch the golden light of the late afternoon stretch across the beautiful wooden floor of the palace, I gently remind you that if you are finding comfort in this slow journey through the past, please consider subscribing to the channel. It is a quiet way to support these peaceful nights of deep rest, allowing us to continue bringing you these soothing historical escapes. Just let the sounds of the rustling silk and the quiet palace guide you further down into relaxation. Settle deeper into your own comfortable space, knowing there is nowhere else you need to be. She reaches the window and rests her hand lightly against the heavy velvet drapery. Outside, the geometric gardens of the palace stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Everything is mathematically perfect. The trees are trimmed into flawless shapes, the fountains are engineered to defy gravity, and the pathways intersect at exact calculated angles. It is an environment of absolute control, a world where the king has successfully tamed nature itself. But as Montespan looks out over this vast domain, she feels a profound lack of control over her own destiny. The sun is dipping below the horizon, casting long, elegant shadows across the pristine lawns. The fading of the daylight mirrors the quiet fading of her own absolute certainty. She turns away from the window and walks slowly toward her ornate vanity table. The table is a marvel of gilded wood and delicate porcelain. Resting upon its surface are numerous small crystal flacons, each containing a different rare oil or sweet floral water. She reaches out and traces the faceted edge of a crystal stopper with her fingertip. The glass is perfectly smooth and cold to the touch. Beside the crystal bottles sits a heavy mirror, backed in pure silver. She looks into the polished glass, studying her own reflection in the dimming light of the room. The face looking back is undeniably beautiful, framed by intricate curls of dark hair and flawless pale skin dusted with fine pearl powder. But the absolute confidence that once radiated from her dark eyes has been replaced by a quiet, lingering doubt. The absolute light of the king's favour had warmed her for over 10 years. It was a radiant, intoxicating heat that granted her unparalleled power and influence. But now, that light is beginning to waver, occasionally turning its bright focus toward the younger, newer faces of the court. The silence in her opulent chamber is not the peaceful, structured silence of Lorraine in his underground room. It is a fragile, echoing silence. It is the sound of a woman waiting for a familiar footstep in the corridor, a footstep that is becoming less and less frequent. Surrounded by gold, silk, and the scent of jasmine, she realizes that all the wealth in the kingdom cannot stop the quiet, steady passage of time. This terrifying realization is the quiet seed that will soon drive her to seek comfort in the darkest, most unglamorous shadows of the kingdom. The night deepens over the vast palace of Versailles. Inside the grand bedchamber of Madame de Montespan, the silence stretches long and thin. The enormous bed she rests upon is a marvel of architecture in its own right, draped in heavy brocade curtains that are pulled tightly shut to keep the draughts at bay. Within this enclosed space the air is warm, and smells faintly of dried lavender sachets and the dying embers of the marble fireplace nearby. The sheets beneath her are woven from the finest linen, soft and cool against the skin, a testament to the absolute comfort that surrounds her every waking moment. Yet, despite the down feathers filling her mattress and the absolute security of the heavy palace walls, sleep remains entirely out of reach. She lies perfectly still on her back, listening to the very quiet, rhythmic breathing of her ladies in waiting who sleep on low pallets in the adjoining room. Their sleep is peaceful and uncomplicated. Hers is heavily burdened by the simple, inescapable truth of passing time. In the quiet dark, her mind wanders to the gentle, unbothered smile of Mademoiselle de Fontanges. This young woman is the newest face at court, carrying the effortless, untethered beauty of youth. There is no sharp intellect in the young woman, no complicated political manoeuvres, only a simple, radiant freshness that has slowly begun to catch the steady gaze of the Sun King. Montespan turns slowly onto her side. The fine linen sheets rustle softly, a dry, hushed sound that seems excessively loud in the profound quiet of the late hour. She pulls the heavy silk quilt up closer to her chin. The fabric is smooth and dense, retaining the heat of her body. For over 10 years she held the king through her sharp wit, her grand presence, and her undeniable brilliance. They were equals in their grand ambitions. But a man who sees himself as the sun does not always want a companion who shines just as brightly. Sometimes he merely wants a quiet pool of water to reflect his own golden light. The young Fontanges is exactly that quiet pool, undisturbed by the heavy weights of state or the complex, aging realities of the court. The ornate clock on the mantelpiece chimes the hour, a soft, melodious ringing of small silver bells that vibrates gently through the thick air of the room. It is a beautiful sound, yet it serves as a relentless reminder of the seconds slipping away, carrying her youth and influence with them. She traces the intricate embroidery of the pillowcase with her fingernail, feeling the raised bumps of the silk thread. Every stitch represents a carefully constructed layer of her life at Versailles, a life built on the fragile foundation of affection. The fear she feels is not a sudden, violent thing. It is a slow, cold settling in her chest, much like the winter frost creeping slowly across the window panes. It is a quiet resignation that the natural order of things is shifting away from her. She closes her eyes, focusing on the scent of the wood smoke drifting faintly from the hearth. It is an earthy, grounding smell. It reminds her of the world outside this gilded cage, a world where survival requires more than just a sharp wit and a beautiful gown. If the absolute light of the king is turning away, she knows she cannot simply stand in the shadows and fade into history. The mind that conquered the most magnificent court in Europe begins to slowly turn its focus away from the brightly lit ballrooms and down toward the hidden, whispered remedies of the common streets. The decision forms quietly in the dark, enveloped in the soft linen and heavy brocade. It is a decision born of absolute solitude and the heavy, quiet burden of a power that is slipping through her fingers like fine, dry sand. As we watch her breathe slowly in the dark, I invite you to let go of your own worries. You do not need to hold on to anything tonight. Just let the mattress support your weight. Let the quiet night take over entirely, and allow your mind to drift peacefully away into the comforting embrace of a deep and restful sleep. The heavy silence of the bedchamber is eventually broken by the slow, deliberate rustle of the linen sheets. Madame de Montespan gently pushes the thick silk quilt aside, allowing the cool night air to wash over her shoulders. She swings her legs over the edge of the towering bed. Her bare feet touch the polished parquet floor. The wood is cool, holding the chill of the late hour, a stark contrast to the profound warmth she just left behind. She does not call for her ladies in waiting. For the first time in many years, she is moving through the shadows entirely alone, guided only by the dim, dying embers in the marble hearth. Her movements are slow and precise, stripped of the grand, sweeping gestures required during the bright hours of the court. She walks softly toward a tall, imposing wardrobe made of dark, heavily carved walnut that rests in the quietest corner of the room. The brass handles are cool against her warm skin. As she pulls the heavy doors open, a faint, dry scent of cedar wood and old dried lavender escapes into the room. This is not the place where her vibrant silk gowns and golden bodices are kept. This space holds items of a more practical, unnoticed nature. She reaches into the dark interior and retrieves a large, heavy bundle of fabric. As she pulls it out, there is no bright rustle of silk or soft whisper of fine lace. The fabric yields with a dull, heavy sigh, collapsing into her arms as a solid weight. It is a heavy woolen cloak, dyed a deep, anonymous shade of charcoal grey. It is the kind of garment worn by the merchants and the quiet travellers of the distant city, designed not for beauty, but for absolute utility and concealment. The wool is coarse, woven from thick, unrefined yarns that still carry the faint, earthy scent of lanolin and distant pastures. Before she puts it on, she must shed the delicate linen nightgown she wears. The thin white fabric slips down her arms and falls silently to the floor, pooling like a small pale cloud against the dark wood. For a brief moment she stands completely exposed to the cold air of the room, feeling incredibly small and tethered to the vast, uncertain world. She lifts the heavy woolen cloak and swings it over her shoulders. The contrast is immediate and shocking to her senses. Her skin is accustomed to the delicate caress of pure silk, the soft embrace of velvet, and the weightless drape of fine muslin. The coarse wool scratches gently against her neck and arms, a continuous, rough friction that grounds her entirely in the physical reality of the current moment. The cloak is incredibly heavy, pressing down upon her shoulders like the physical manifestation of her own quiet desperation. She reaches up and fastens the crude iron clasp at her throat. The metal is dull, forged in a common fire, lacking any trace of the gold or silver that normally adorns her body. The heavy metal clicks firmly into place, securing the coarse fabric around her. She reaches back and pulls the deep, oversized hood up and over her head. The thick wool drapes heavily on either side of her face, casting her delicate features into deep, impenetrable shadow. She turns slowly toward the silver-backed mirror resting on her vanity table. The woman who looks back is no longer the radiant favourite of the Sun King. The brilliant, sparkling eyes and the perfectly coiffed hair are completely hidden. In the dim golden light of the dying fire, the mirror reflects only a dark, shapeless silhouette, a quiet ghost preparing to slip unnoticed from the grandest palace in the world. The transformation is complete. She has shed the magnificent illusion of Versailles and wrapped herself in the coarse, heavy reality of the night. She turns away from the glass and walks toward a small, narrow door concealed perfectly within the crimson damask wall coverings. This is a servant corridor, a hidden vein running directly behind the glorious facade of the palace walls. She rests her hand on the iron latch. The metal is freezing to the touch. She takes one final, slow breath of the sweet jasmine-scented air of her bedchamber, filling her lungs with the familiar comfort of her domain. Then she presses the latch down. It moves with a quiet, solid thunk that vibrates into her palm. She steps over the threshold and into the dark, stony draught of the hidden passage. Her soft leather shoes make no sound against the unpolished stone floor. The sweet smell of perfume is instantly replaced by the smell of cold limestone and settled dust, welcoming her into the quiet, unseen parts of the kingdom. The heavy oak door at the very end of the servant corridor opens outward onto a small, forgotten courtyard. The night air outside is thick with a chilling fog that has rolled steadily off the distant river, swallowing the sharp edges of the palace architecture. Waiting in the deepest patch of shadows is a simple, completely unadorned carriage. It bears no royal crests painted upon its doors, no gilded trimmings catching the pale moonlight, and no velvet curtains hanging in the windows. It is constructed only of dark, weathered wood and plain iron fixtures. Two heavy draught horses stand quietly in the traces, their warm breath pluming into the freezing air like pale smoke. The immediate scent is earthy and raw, a mixture of damp hay, wet horsehair, and the rich turned soil of the palace outskirts. She steps up into the carriage, the wooden step creaking a quiet, dull protest under her weight. The interior is dark and bitterly cold, carrying the heavy scent of worn, untreated leather and damp wood. She settles onto the hard bench seat, pulling the coarse woolen cloak even tighter around her shoulders, completely losing herself in the heavy folds of the grey fabric. The driver, a silent figure wrapped securely in heavy coats, gives a soft click of his tongue, and the carriage slowly begins to move. First, there is the soft rhythmic crunch of the perfectly raked gravel beneath the iron-bound wheels, a sound of order and precision. But as they pass through the outer iron gates and leave the immaculate, geometric grounds of the palace behind, the wheels strike the ancient, heavily rutted road leading toward Paris. The sound changes instantly. It becomes a constant, heavy rumbling, a deep and rhythmic vibration that travels up from the wooden floorboards, through the soles of her simple leather shoes, and settles deep into her bones. The iron grinding against the hard stones creates a repetitive, grounding noise that swallows all other sounds of the night. The carriage sways gently from side to side, rocking in a predictable, hypnotic rhythm. As we travel along this misty road, listening to the steady turn of the heavy wheels, I want to invite you to simply let go of the waking world. If this quiet journey into the past is helping you relax and find peace, taking a brief moment to subscribe to the channel is a wonderful way to support these restful histories, ensuring we can continue this peaceful work together. Just allow the gentle rocking motion of our carriage to guide you deeper into your mattress, releasing the tension in your shoulders and breathing in the quiet safety of the night. The thick fog presses tightly against the small, unwashed glass windows of the carriage doors. Condensation forms heavily on the cold panes, blurring the outside world into a smear of grey and black. A single drop of water gathers at the top corner of the glass, becoming too heavy to hold its place, and traces a slow, crooked line all the way down the pane. Montespan watches this solitary drop descend, her mind completely detached from the bright, echoing halls she left behind. The journey takes hours, marked only by the steady, muffled clopping of the horses and the creaking of the wooden suspension. Eventually, the open air of the countryside begins to change. The city of Paris approaches very slowly, announced not by grand lights or welcoming music, but by a profound shift in the atmosphere. The smell of the air grows incredibly dense. The clean scent of rain and wet earth is replaced by the heavy, suffocating odour of ancient wood smoke, crowded stone buildings, and the sluggish, muddy waters of the river. The carriage slows its pace significantly as it enters the narrow, winding streets of the outer districts. The tall, leaning houses seem to close in from both sides, blocking out whatever faint light the moon might have offered. The sky narrows to a thin, jagged ribbon of dark grey far above the steep slate roofs. She is passing into a world where the absolute power of a king holds very little warmth, and where the raw, desperate survival of the night reigns supreme. The transition is complete, leaving the golden sun far behind and embracing the deep, damp shadows of the forgotten city. The heavy carriage comes to a final sluggish halt. The iron-bound wheels scrape roughly against the uneven, loose cobblestones before settling deep into a rut filled with cold, stagnant water. The motion stops entirely, leaving only the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the wooden cabin as the heavy draught horses shift their weight in the freezing fog. The driver climbs down from his high seat. His heavy boots make a dull, wet thud as they strike the muddy street. He walks slowly around to the side and pulls the plain wooden door open. The night air that floods into the carriage is fiercely cold and completely devoid of the manicured, sweet scents of the royal gardens. It smells strongly of wet ash, rotting cabbage, damp stone, and the slow, muddy waters of the river that wind through the poorest districts of the city. Madame de Montespan steps down from the carriage. As her foot leaves the wooden step, her simple, soft leather shoe sinks immediately into the thick, freezing mud of the alleyway. The sensation is entirely alien to a woman accustomed to walking only upon polished oak, thick wool carpets, and perfectly swept gravel paths. The mud is dense and clinging, pulling slightly at her soul as she shifts her weight. She draws the coarse grey cloak tighter around her body, ensuring the heavy hood completely obscures her face. She takes a slow, careful step toward the leaning, narrow structure before her, her eyes scanning the decaying facade through the thick mist. The walls of the hovel are constructed of rough, crumbling plaster and exposed, rotting timber that sags under the weight of the steep slate roof. The dwelling seems to lean against its equally dilapidated neighbours for support, a chaotic jumble of desperate architecture that blocks out the night sky entirely. She stops before the door. It is a solid slab of darkened, weathered wood, splintered heavily along the bottom edge where decades of filthy rainwater have soaked deep into the grain. The heavy iron hinges are encrusted with thick layers of flaky orange rust. She raises a hand, still completely enveloped in the rough wool of her cloak, and knocks twice against the wood. The sound is a dull, heavy thud that is instantly swallowed by the damp fog and the vast, oppressive silence of the alley. The door does not open with a sudden motion. Instead, it is dragged slowly inward across the uneven floor, emitting a low, continuous groan of wood scraping against hard dirt. As the dark gap widens, the air that spills out from the threshold hits her like a physical weight. It is a dense, suffocating wall of heat and odour that stands in absolute contrast to the freezing fog at her back. It smells intensely of a poorly ventilated wood fire, carrying the bitter, acrid sting of green wood burning slowly in a cramped space. Woven into that smoke is the sharp, medicinal tang of dried wormwood, crushed valerian root and the heavy, greasy scent of melting tallow. It is an atmosphere that feels ancient, secretive, and profoundly uncomfortable. She steps over the rotted threshold, leaving the cold, wet night behind. The heavy wooden door is immediately pushed shut behind her, sealing her completely inside the stifling claustrophobic warmth of the room. The transition is absolute and disorienting. The light inside is incredibly dim, struggling to pierce through the thick, hazy air. A small, meagre fire burns in a crude hearth made of blackened stones, the damp logs hissing and popping softly in the quiet. Scattered around the room are several thick tallow candles, their yellow flames sputtering and smoking, casting long, erratic shadows that dance wildly across the peeling plaster walls. Hanging heavily from the low, soot-stained wooden rafters are countless bundles of dried flora. They are tied with rough twine, hanging upside down like forgotten bats in a cave. As the heat rises from the small hearth, it brushes against these bundles, causing them to rustle with a very soft, dry, papery sound. The ceiling is so low that she can almost feel the heat radiating directly onto the crown of her hooded head. She remains perfectly still near the door, allowing her eyes to slowly adjust to the murky gloom. Beneath her feet, the floor is not made of wood or stone, but of heavily packed earth, uneven and hard, scattered with dry husks, bits of white ash, and crushed leaves that crackle faintly beneath her leather shoes. She is standing in the very heart of the Parisian Shad, a world governed entirely by survival, superstition, and the quiet, desperate transactions of the night. As Madame de Montespan stands beside the suffocating warmth of the small room, the oppressive heat of the hearth fire begins to seep through the thick, damp wool of her heavy grey cloak. Slowly, with a deliberate and measured movement, she raises her cold hands to loosen the iron clasp at her throat. She does not remove the deep hood, preferring the absolute anonymity of the shadow it casts over her face, but she allows the heavy, coarse fabric to part just a fraction at her chest. In that small, unintentional opening, the dim, sputtering yellow light of the tallow candles catches a brief, startling glimpse of the brilliant world she left behind. Beneath the rough disguise of the merchant cloak, she still wears her heavy, stiff silk gown dyed in a rich shade of deep azure. The hem of this exquisite garment, entirely unsuited for the squalor of this forgotten alley, brushes softly against the packed earth floor. The delicate edge is woven with incredibly fine threads of pure gold, tracing intricate patterns of vines and flowers that normally sparkle under the radiant crystal chandeliers of the royal court. Now that same fragile gold thread scrapes gently against the dry dirt, picking up tiny flakes of white ash and the crushed, brittle remnants of dried leaves. The sound is a quiet, heart-breaking whisper, the sound of unimaginable wealth dragging itself through the absolute bottom of the city. It is the physical manifestation of her descent, a visual clash of two entirely separate worlds colliding in the murky gloom of the hovel. From the darkest corner of the room, beyond the immediate reach of the small hearth fire, a figure slowly detaches from the heavy shadows. This is Catherine Monvoisin, known to the desperate souls of Paris simply as Lavoisier. She does not step forward with the dramatic, terrifying presence of a fictional sorceress. Instead, she moves with the heavy, weary, and practical gait of a merchant who has spent far too many long nights catering to the hidden fears of the wealthy. Her clothing is entirely functional, made of dark, heavy-spun linen and a thick, stained leather apron that carries the deeply ingrained sense of her trade. There is no velvet here, no delicate lace, and no shining gold. As Lavoisin steps into the outer perimeter of the candlelight, the harsh, wavering illumination reveals a face carved by years of difficult living and quiet, calculated observation. Her skin is weathered, bearing the tiny dark lines of soot that never fully wash away from the corners of her eyes and the deep creases of her forehead. Her hands, resting calmly against the rough leather of her apron, are broad and capable. The fingernails are permanently stained a dull, earthy brown from the constant grinding of roots, sharp minerals, and other less pleasant substances. She looks at the hooded figure standing before her with an expression of absolute neutrality. She recognizes the heavy rustle of the silk. She recognizes the subtle, lingering scent of jasmine perfume attempting to hide beneath the damp wool, and she recognizes the rigid posture of a woman accustomed to commanding the very earth she walks upon. Yet, in this stifling, low-ceilinged room, the established hierarchy of the kingdom simply ceases to exist. The absolute power of the Sun King holds no sway over the damp, packed earth of this hidden space. Here the currency is not royal fever or noble titles. The currency is desperation, secrecy, and the silent, heavy understanding of human frailty. The two women stand facing each other, separated by a few feet of dancing shadows and floating white ash. One is the pinnacle of beauty and courtly grace, terrified of losing her brilliant light and fading into obscurity. The other is a creature of the dark, holding the murky, questionable remedies that promise a fragile control over an uncontrollable future. They do not exchange formal greetings. There is no need for the polite, empty words that govern the bright, echoing ballrooms of Versailles. The silence that hangs between them is thick and transactional, a heavy, unspoken acknowledgement of the terrible lengths to which people will go when they feel their steady foundation slowly giving way beneath them. Montespan listens to the quiet, rhythmic popping of the green wood in the fire, feeling the profound weight of the path she has chosen. The absolute contrast of their physical worlds is stark, yet, in this deeply hidden moment, surrounded by the smell of smoke and dried herbs, they are bound tightly together by the dark, quiet mechanisms of survival in a kingdom where love and power are hopelessly intertwined. Between the two women, occupying the small, crowded space of the stifling room, sits a low, heavily battered wooden table. Its surface tells the long, quiet story of the hovel. The wood is dark, almost entirely black in the dim candlelight, stained deep into the grain by years of spilled essential oils, crushed dark berries, and the slow, inescapable accumulation of winter soot. Deep grooves and ragged scratches mar the once smooth boards, carved patiently by the sharp edges of small iron knives used to dissect countless bundles of dry roots and brittle stems. It is a crude, purely functional piece of furniture, completely unpolished and unapologetic in its raw state. Yet, in this quiet, desperate hour, this ruined table becomes the absolute centre of their shared universe. It is the physical boundary where the staggering wealth of the palace and the murky magic of the slums meet to conduct their silent, heavy trade. Madame de Montespan slowly reaches her hand out from beneath the heavy, stifling folds of the charcoal grey cloak. The movement is hesitant, carrying the immense, crushing weight of the reality she is choosing to accept. The coarse wool sleeve falls back, revealing a delicate, slender wrist and incredibly pale skin, completely unblemished by the harsh, abrasive realities of the outside world. In her palm she holds a small, heavy pouch crafted from incredibly soft, dark suede. The fine leather is pulled tight at the top by a thin, woven silken cord. Her fingers, trembling just a fraction in the oppressive heat of the room, slowly pull the knot loose. The silk gives way with a soft, yielding slip, opening the dark mouth of the small bag. She tilts her hand gracefully, allowing the contents to slide forward. A small collection of heavy gold coins spills out onto the dark, stained wood of the work table. The sound they make is not a bright musical jingle. Solid gold is an incredibly dense, heavy metal. When it strikes the thick, damp wood, it produces a low, dull, and profoundly weighty clinking sound. It is a series of slow, resonant thuds that seem to completely swallow the quiet, rhythmic popping of the hearth fire for a brief, heavy second. The coins settle upon the scratched surface, catching the dim, yellow light of the sputtering tallow candles and reflecting it back as a warm, undeniable glow. Each heavy coin bears the perfectly minted, proud profile of King Louis XIV, the Sun King. His image, carefully designed to project absolute divine authority and unwavering, eternal light, now rests in the darkest, dirtiest corner of his own vast capital, brought here in secret by the very woman he elevated above all others. It is a quiet, devastating irony. The gleaming, flawless gold, a symbol of royal magnificence and absolute power, sits in stark, surreal contrast against the black, oily wood of the herbalist. Le Voisin looks down at the shining coins. Her weathered face remains completely impassive, a mask of carved stone in the flickering light. She has seen this exact same quiet desperation 1,000 times before, from the lowest frightened servants to the highest ranking nobility. Grief, deep fear, and the profound terror of losing control all spend the exact same golden currency in her narrow, smoky room. She slowly extends her own hand across the table. Her broad, capable fingers, permanently stained with dark earth and bitter botanical saps, move deliberately over the gold. She does not snatch the coins with the frantic greed of a thief. She gathers them with the slow, steady motion of a weary labourer collecting a meagre harvest. The rough, calloused skin of her palm sweeps the heavy metal together, the gold clinking softly, almost mournfully, once more as it disappears forever into the deep, dark pocket of her heavy leather apron. No words are spoken to confirm the exchange. The transaction of despair requires no spoken agreements or written contracts. The presence of the heavy gold is a complete confession of vulnerability, and the slow sweeping of the weathered hand is the silent acceptance of the heavy burden. Montespan watches the coins vanish, feeling a sudden strange emptiness settle deep in her chest. The absolute wealth of the kingdom has brought her nothing but a deeper, more permanent step into the shadows. The quiet reality of the room presses in on her again, the suffocating heat, the bitter smell of melting tallow, and the overwhelming, heavy silence. As we sit together in this heavy silence, watching the long shadows dance lazily across the peeling plaster walls, allow your own burdens to slip quietly away. You do not need to carry the weight of tomorrow, nor do you need to untangle the complex, weary knots of the past. The transaction is complete, the night has taken over, and there is nothing left to do but surrender entirely to the quiet, peaceful stillness. Let your breathing remain incredibly slow and steady, sinking deeper and deeper into the absolute comfort and unyielding safety of your own space. With the heavy gold coins safely secured in the deep pocket of her stained leather apron, La Voisine turns slowly away from the battered wooden table. She moves toward a small, narrow cabinet built directly into the uneven stone wall of the hearth. The wooden door of the cabinet is completely warped by the constant suffocating heat of the room, requiring a firm, heavy push to open. The wood groans softly, a dry, protesting sound that settles quickly into the dusty air. From the dark, shallow interior, she retrieves a small, meticulously folded packet. She turns back to the table and places the small object gently upon the dark wood. It is not an ornate crystal flaken or a beautifully painted porcelain jar. It is simply a small square of heavy, unbleached linen paper, folded tightly into a neat, precise triangle to keep the contents perfectly secure. The paper is slightly rough to the touch, carrying the faint, earthy scent of dried roots and old dust. Lavoisier reaches out with her calloused thumb and forefinger, carefully unfolding the top flap of the paper to reveal the silent, heavy reality of their transaction. Resting in the centre of the crease is a small mound of finely ground powder. In the dim, sputtering light of the tallow candles, The mixture reveals a complex, quiet texture. It is predominantly a pale, chalky white, the colour of crushed minerals and deep earth. This is a heavy, silent element born in the dark, cold veins of the ground, completely devoid of emotion or intent. Mixed into this pale dust are tiny, almost microscopic flecks of iridescent green, the dried and ground remnants of small, delicate winged creatures, and scattered grains of a dark, rusted crimson. There is absolutely no grand, terrifying aura surrounding this small pile of dust. It does not glow, and it does not emit strange vapours. It sits completely inert on the rough paper, looking like nothing more than common ash swept from a cold hearth. Yet, in the quiet, desperate mind of Madame de Montespan, this pale powder holds the absolute power to alter the course of the entire kingdom. It is a love philtre, a quiet, unseen anchor designed to bind the wandering heart of the Sun King and pull his radiant light back toward her fading orbit. The ingredients are harsh and unforgiving, but the intention behind them is born of a profound, devastating fear of abandonment. The herbalist does not offer any instructions or whispered incantations. The methodology of this quiet chemistry is already perfectly understood between them. A tiny pinch, no larger than a grain of coarse sea salt, dissolved silently into a heavy crystal goblet of sweet ruby wine, or folded carefully into the rich spice sauces served at the grand royal banquets. It is a slow, methodical infiltration, requiring immense patience and nerves of absolute steel. Montespan reaches out from beneath her heavy grey cloak. Her pale, trembling fingers gently pinch the sides of the folded linen paper, securing the triangular packet tightly once more. As she lifts it from the dark wood, she feels the incredibly slight weight of the powder shifting inside. It is a weightless thing, yet it feels infinitely heavier than the gold she just surrendered. She tucks the small packet deep into the inner pocket of her silk bodice, pressing it firmly against her chest, right above her own rapidly beating heart. The cold, unyielding reality of the powder now rests perfectly against the warm, terrified vulnerability of the woman holding it. She takes a final, slow breath of the heavy, smoke-filled air, memorizing the bitter scent of the hovel as a permanent reminder of the depths to which she has descended. The transaction is fully complete. The absolute pinnacle of Versailles has successfully tethered herself to the absolute bottom of Paris. She turns away from the battered table, her heavy wool cloak sweeping silently across the packed earth floor, ready to carry her quiet, toxic secret back into the brilliant, blinding light of the royal court. Let the heavy weight of her secret slip from your own mind entirely. You do not need to carry the burdens of these ancient figures. As the door of the hovel groans shut behind her, sealing away the smoke and the shadows, allow your own eyes to grow heavy. Focus entirely on the gentle rise and fall of your chest, letting the slow, rhythmic tide of your breathing wash away any remaining tension, leaving you completely enveloped in the absolute peace of a deep and dreamless night. We leave the suffocating heat and the bitter wood smoke of the Parisian hovel far behind us, drifting smoothly through the cold night air, returning once more to the vast, quiet architecture of Versailles. We move away from the memories of the past and step softly into the present reality of the investigation. The great palace is completely asleep. The grand ballrooms, which only hours ago were filled with the bright music of stringed instruments and the rhythmic sweeping of heavy silk gowns, now stand entirely empty and dark. The immense crystal chandeliers hang motionless from the painted ceilings, their hundreds of unlit candles waiting silently for the return of the sun. We bypass these echoing halls and travel deep into the very centre of the palace, entering the private inner sanctum of King Louis XIV. The king's bedchamber is vast and heavily insulated against the winter chill. The walls are covered in thick woven tapestries that absorb every stray sound, creating an atmosphere of absolute, almost unnatural stillness. In the centre of the room, near a grand marble fireplace where the last few embers glow with a dull, steady orange heat, sits a magnificent writing desk. It is a masterpiece of craftsmanship, built from solid, polished ebony and inlaid with intricate patterns of smooth, cold brass. The surface is covered in a deep green velvet blotter. Resting squarely in the centre of this soft green expanse is a single, heavy document. King Louis sits alone in a high-backed chair heavily padded with crimson velvet. He wears a simple, unadorned dressing gown of dark silk, having dismissed his countless valets and attendants for the night. The air in the room smells of expensive purified beeswax from a single tall candelabra resting on the corner of the desk, mingled with the faint, dry scent of old paper and the lingering aroma of the sweet cedar wood burning quietly in the hearth. He reaches out a steady hand toward the document. It is the highly classified report sent directly from the heavily draped underground room of Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie. The report is sealed shut with a thick, heavy dollop of dark crimson wax stamped perfectly with the official crest of the Parisian police. The king rests his thumb against the edge of the seal. He applies a slow, deliberate pressure. The brittle wax gives way with a sharp, dry cracking sound that seems to echo loudly in the profound quiet of the chamber. Small crimson flakes of the broken seal fall silently onto the green velvet blotter like tiny drops of hardened blood. He unfolds the thick linen paper. The familiar, elegant indigo ink of the Lieutenant General catches the warm, golden light of the candles. The paper rustles softly in his hands, a clean, crisp sound that carries the immense weight of truth. He reads the words with a slow, focused deliberation. He traces the lines detailing the clandestine transactions, the dark alleys, and the unglazed ceramic vials holding desperate remedies. He reads the names of the terrified servants and the impoverished alchemists. And then his eyes stop moving. They rest entirely upon the carefully penned name of the woman who has shared his absolute power, his deepest confidence, and his private chambers for over a decade. Madame de Montespan. For a man who commands the greatest army in Europe, a man whose mere frown can banish a noble family to ruin, the reaction is profoundly understated. There is no sudden gasp of breath. There is no violent sweeping of the heavy inkwells from the desk. There is no shout of rage echoing into the dark corridors. The absolute power of the monarch dictates a completely different, far more terrifying response. He simply stops. His breathing becomes incredibly shallow and slow. His hands holding the edges of the linen paper remain perfectly still, like hands carved from pale marble. The silence that descends upon the king is immense and heavy. It is the profound, isolating silence of a man who suddenly realizes he is standing entirely alone on a very high peak, surrounded by a fog of deception. He looks past the top edge of the parchment, staring blankly into the dark corners of his bedchamber. The magnificent illusion he has spent his entire life building, the grand illusion of absolute loyalty, divine right, and radiant love, shatters quietly in his mind. It makes no dramatic noise as it falls apart. It simply dissolves, leaving behind a cold, unyielding emptiness. The Sun King realizes in the deepest hour of the night that the shadows he cast were longest right at his very feet. As he sits completely frozen in his heavy, quiet contemplation, feel the absolute safety of your own room wrapping around you. You are not burdened by crowns, grand illusions, or complex betrayals. You are completely secure in this moment, held safely by the soft mattress beneath you. Allow the steady, rhythmic ticking of the silence to soothe your mind, drifting gently on the slow, reliable current of the night, knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. King Louis slowly lowers the heavy linen paper, placing it gently back upon the green velvet blotter. The movement is incredibly quiet, treating the fragile document as if it were a delicate pane of glass. He pushes his high-backed chair away from the ebony desk. The heavy wooden legs slide smoothly over the thick wool carpet, making a soft, muted brushing sound. He stands up, his dark silk dressing gown settling around his ankles, pooling softly against the floor. He walks deliberately toward the tall, arched windows that dominate the far wall of his private bedchamber. The room remains completely silent, save for the quiet rustling of his silk robe and the steady rhythmic popping of the dying embers in the marble hearth. He reaches the window and places his bare palm flat against the cold, thick glass. The sudden chill is a sharp, grounding sensation against his warm skin. He looks out into the vast, sprawling night. Below him stretches the absolute masterpiece of his reign, the grand geometric gardens of Versailles, bathed in the pale silver light of the moon. The vast landscape looks like an enormous, intricate puzzle constructed of deep shadows and pale stone. The gravel pathways are straight and uncompromising, cutting through the manicured lawns with absolute mathematical perfection. The large trees stand like silent sentinels, their branches pruned into rigid, identical geometric shapes. This grand garden is the ultimate physical manifestation of his absolute authority. Out there, he has successfully commanded nature itself to bend to his iron will. The wild, chaotic growth of the ancient forest was completely stripped away, replaced by flawless symmetry and unquestioning order. The water in the grand fountains does not flow freely, it is engineered to perform in perfectly timed, orchestrated displays of power. Everything in his line of sight is structured, completely predictable, and entirely bound to his royal command. Yet, as he stares at the perfect silver lines of the distant gravel paths, the heavy weight of the police report anchors him to a completely different reality. The absolute control he wields over the earth outside his window stops abruptly right at the heavy glass pane. Inside the great palace, deep within the private chambers wrapped in rich velvet and gold, a wild, untamed chaos has silently taken root. The perfect geometry of his kingdom is nothing more than a magnificent facade, carefully hiding the unpredictable, messy reality of human fear and dark ambition. He breathes in slowly, his warm breath fogging the cold glass, temporarily blurring the flawless lines of the garden into a soft, comforting grey smudge. As we stand here in the quiet dark, let your own deep, rhythmic breaths mirror his slow pace. Allow your breathing to fog away the sharp, rigid edges of your waking day. Let the schedules, the demands, and the bright lights of the afternoon blur into a soft, peaceful smudge of greys and blacks. Settle deeper into your soft pillows, feeling the solid, unconditional support of your bed, and let the gentle quiet of the palace night wrap around you like a heavy, warm blanket. King Louis turns slowly away from the cold glass of the window, leaving a small, fading circle of condensation behind. He does not ring the heavy silver bell on his desk to wake the guards. Such a loud noise would shatter the fragile containment of this dark secret. Instead, he walks softly toward the heavy oak door of his antechamber. He opens it just a fraction, the oiled brass hinges completely silent. In the dim light of the corridor, his most trusted valet is waiting, a man whose absolute loyalty is matched only by his profound ability to move without leaving a ripple in the quiet air. The king gives no written orders, nor does he speak a single word aloud. A subtle nod of his head, a heavy dropping of his shoulders, and the silent handing over of a small, intricate iron key are entirely enough. The valet bows his head, acknowledging the quiet gravity of the midnight task. The search must be conducted with absolute invisibility. The valet steps backward into the shadows of the grand corridor, joined by two other trusted men wrapped in dark wool coats. They carry no bright torches, only a single heavy brass lantern. The lantern is carefully constructed to hide the flame, featuring thick beveled glass panels that soften the light into a dull, muted amber glow. The brass handle is tightly wrapped in soft, worn leather to prevent even the slightest metallic clinking as they walk. Their soft leather soles step onto the cold, polished marble of the grand hallways. The sound is barely a whisper, a soft, rhythmic brushing instantly swallowed by the vast ceilings above. They move in a tight, precise formation, a small pool of warm light drifting slowly through an ocean of deep shadows. As they pass the towering mirrors lining the walls, the glass reflects only a fleeting, distorted ghost of their movement before they vanish into the next corridor. The air in these empty halls is distinctly colder, smelling faintly of damp limestone and the dry dust settled on the heavy velvet curtains. They navigate the intricate maze of hidden passages and private doors that connect the sprawling palace. Their ultimate destination is the heavily gilded, fragrant sanctuary of Madame de Montespan. Their physical movements remain perfectly calm and completely unhurried, honouring the heavy sleep of the kingdom around them. As they journey deeper into the dark heart of the palace, let your own mind drift further away from the active thoughts of the day. Allow the soft rhythmic brushing of their shoes against the marble to carry you down into a state of profound relaxation. The doors are locked, and there is absolutely nothing you need to attend to. Just breathe slowly, sinking into the soft mattress, letting the comforting shadows bring you gently closer to a deep and uninterrupted rest. The heavy oak door leading into the private apartments of Madame de Montespan yields without a single sound. The three men step over the threshold, moving from the cold, echoing marble of the corridor onto a thick, luxurious Persian carpet. The dense wool immediately absorbs their footsteps, rendering their slow intrusion entirely silent. The air inside these rooms is completely different from the rest of the vast palace. It is incredibly heavy, saturated with the lingering sweet fragrance of crushed jasmine, rose water, and the warm, slightly metallic scent of sleeping breath. The grand bedchamber is shrouded in deep darkness, the thick brocade curtains pulled tightly shut to block out the silver moonlight completely. The single brass lantern casts a faint, amber pool of light across the polished floor, guiding them toward the far corner of the room. There, standing tall and imposing against the crimson damask wallpaper, is a magnificent cabinet. It is crafted from solid black ebony, a wood so incredibly dense and heavy that it feels almost like cold, smooth stone beneath the fingertips. The dark surface is heavily inlaid with delicate, shimmering pieces of pale mother of pearl and thin veins of pure gold. These delicate additions catch the dim lantern light, creating a beautiful, silent display of staggering wealth right in the deepest shadows of the room. The lead valet steps forward, his breathing incredibly slow and measured to avoid making any sudden noise. He raises the small, intricate iron key handed to him by the king. He carefully guides the dark metal toward the ornate brass keyhole resting at the center of the heavy cabinet doors. The metal slides inside smoothly. It is a perfect, undeniable fit. He turns the key with agonizing slowness. Inside the heavy wooden door, the intricate brass tumblers slide into their correct positions. The sound is tiny, a precise mechanical click that feels incredibly sharp in the heavy, perfumed silence of the sleeping chamber. He places his hands flat against the cold, smooth ebony and gently pulls. The doors swing outward, revealing rows of small, perfectly constructed drawers. The valet reaches for the first drawer. He wraps his fingers around the small, gilded handle and pulls it slowly toward his chest. The drawer slides open with a soft, smooth friction of wood, moving against wood, a quiet rushing sound that fills the immediate space. Inside, resting upon a bed of pale blue silk, lies a tangled collection of bright satin ribbons and delicate white lace collars. But the men are not here to admire fine fabrics. Their hands gently push the soft silk aside, searching for the heavy, silent things carefully hidden beneath the beauty. As the men continue their quiet, methodical search through the dark wood, allow your own body to sink deeper into a state of total rest. Release the tiny muscles in your jaw, let your shoulders drop completely into your mattress, and allow the quiet rhythmic sounds of the night to wash away any remaining tension. You are perfectly safe, perfectly warm, and entirely insulated from the heavy burdens of the waking world. The search continues in the profound silence of the heavy bedchamber. The lead valet carefully pushes aside the delicate layers of white lace and soft silk ribbons inside the shallow ebony drawer. His movements are deeply deliberate, treating the expensive fabrics as if they were nothing more than fragile cobwebs. Hidden completely beneath this innocent facade of courtly beauty, his fingers brush against something distinctly hard and entirely out of place. It does not possess the soft, yielding texture of a velvet pouch, nor does it have the smooth, refined shape of a cut crystal perfume bottle. He wraps his hand around the object and pulls it gently upward into the dim amber glow of the brass lantern. It is a small, unglazed ceramic vial. The clay is rough, porous, and baked in a dull, earthy brown. It is completely identical to the modest vials resting in the wooden box of the police tribunal. There is absolutely no label attached to the bottle, no silk ribbon tying it shut, and no gilded seal to indicate its origin. It is a stark, ugly thing completely alien to the magnificent gold and ebony surroundings. The valet holds the vial carefully between his thumb and forefinger. The heavy clay is incredibly cold to the touch. It feels like a piece of frozen earth brought inside from the bitter winter night. He gently traces the rim with his fingertip. The top is sealed shut with a simple, rough piece of carved cork pressed firmly into the narrow neck to prevent even the slightest spill. He does not attempt to pull the stopper, fully understanding the quiet, terrifying weight this simple vessel carries. He places the small ceramic vial silently onto a dark velvet cloth they brought to muffle any sounds. He turns his attention back to the dark interior of the drawer. His hands move methodically, feeling the very back corners. He discovers a second vial, then a third. Each one is completely identical, rough, unlabeled, and cold. They sit together on the cloth, forming a quiet, undeniable truth that slowly shatters the fragile illusion of courtly loyalty. As the men uncover these quiet secrets hidden in the dark, I invite you to let go of your own hidden worries. You do not need to conceal your tiredness or hold on to the heavy thoughts of the day. Release them completely into the quiet night. Let your breathing slow down to match the steady, rhythmic ticking of the silence, knowing you are absolutely safe, warm, and entirely supported by the soft bed beneath you. The men shift their focus to the heavy lower compartments of the ebony cabinet. The valet pulls a wide, deep drawer outward. The wood slides with a low, resonant hum, a sound born of immense weight. Inside this lower space, they do not find rough clay. Instead, they find neat stacks of heavy parchment and folded linen paper, carefully bound together by dark silken cords. The soft amber light of the lantern washes over the top document. He gently unties the silk cord. It falls away with a soft whisper. The valet lifts the first letter. The paper is incredibly thick, retaining the faint scent of pressed rose petals, mingled with a sharp undertone of crushed minerals. This is a profound contradiction of sense. He unfolds the page. The movement produces a crisp rustle, a sound that feels magnified in the overwhelming silence of the sleeping room. The dark indigo ink spells out words of desperate affection and grand promises of eternal love. The handwriting is elegant and flowing, yet interwoven between these poetic lines of courtly devotion are completely different symbols. They are harsh, angular marks of alchemy, detailing precise measurements of crushed roots and bitter botanical extracts. The language of romance and the equations of hidden chemistry are bound together. It is a map of a terrified heart. The absolute power of the palace required perfect appearances, driving the most desperate fears deep underground onto these hidden pages. The valet does not read the words for meaning. He merely catalogues the truth of their existence. He carefully sets the letter down beside the rough ceramic vials resting on the dark velvet cloth. As the evidence of a restless mind is collected in the dark, allow your own mind to find complete stillness. Let the heavy thoughts of the day slip from your grasp. Sink deeper into the absolute comfort of your mattress. Focus entirely on the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing, feeling perfectly safe in the quiet embrace of the night. The valet gathers the corners of the heavy velvet cloth. He folds the dark fabric over the unglazed ceramic vials and the thick stacks of folded linen paper. The soft velvet entirely absorbs the hollow clinking of the rough clay and muffles the crisp rustle of the parchment. He ties the bundle securely with a simple knot. His hands move to restore the perfect illusion of the grand chamber. He gently smooths out the pale blue silk lining the bottom of the ebony drawer. He arranges the delicate white lace collars and the satin ribbons exactly as they were resting before. He pushes the heavy wooden drawer inward. It ends with a muted thud as the wood perfectly meets the frame. He inserts the small iron key into the ornate brass lock. A slow turn produces a tiny, precise mechanical click. The cabinet is secured once more, standing tall and silent in the deepest shadows. Its pristine surface reveals absolutely nothing. The grand facade of safety remains completely intact. The three men step backward, carrying the muffled bundle and the dim brass lantern. They cross the thick Persian carpet, their soft leather shoes completely silent. They pull the heavy oak door open just enough to slip through, leaving the sweet jasmine-scented air entirely undisturbed. Madame de Montespan continues to sleep in her magnificent bed, unaware that her hidden truths have been carried away. As the door closes completely on the sleeping chamber, let your own eyes close entirely on the waking world. You have absolutely nothing to hide tonight. Allow your muscles to relax completely, letting the soft mattress carry your full weight. Breathe in the clean air of your room, and let the gentle rhythm of the night guide you toward deep rest. The quiet men return through the cold marble corridors, moving like slow shadows retreating from the dawn. They enter the private bedchamber of King Louis. The grand room is exactly as they left it. The fire in the marble hearth has burned down to a deep, glowing orange, casting a faint heat into the heavy air. The king sits completely still in his velvet chair, a silent guardian of his own crumbling illusion. The lead valet approaches the dark ebony desk. He gently places the bundled velvet cloth onto the green blotter. He unties the knot with slow, deliberate fingers. The thick fabric falls open, revealing the small ceramic vials and the folded linen letters. In the bright light of the beeswax candles, the rough clay looks profoundly ugly against the polished wood and delicate gold inlay of the royal workspace. The valet steps back and bows his head, retreating into the deep shadows near the heavy oak door. He does not speak. Words are completely unnecessary. The physical evidence resting on the desk tells a complete and devastating story. The absolute power of the monarch cannot erase the existence of these cold, unglazed bottles. King Louis looks down at the vials. He does not reach out to touch them. He simply stares at the rough earth of the clay and the intricate indigo ink of the hidden letters. The silence in the room transforms. It is no longer a peaceful rest. It is a heavy, suffocating weight pressing down upon his shoulders. The grand architecture of Versailles feels incredibly fragile tonight, a hollow shell built over a foundation of hidden desperation. As the heavy silence settles over the king, allow the quiet peace of your own room to settle over you. You are entirely free from the burdens of crowns and hidden truths. Let the soft weight of your blanket hold you securely. Breathe slowly, feeling the reliable support of your mattress beneath you, and let the deep night carry you peacefully onward into sleep. The Sun King sits completely isolated within his magnificent fortress. The grand title he bears, meant to evoke the life-giving warmth of the daytime sky, suddenly feels incredibly cold and distant. He stares at the unglazed clay resting on his ebony desk. The contrast is profound. He has spent his entire life building an empire of gold, light, and pure reason. Yet, the people closest to him, the ones who stand directly in the absolute center of his radiance, are desperately reaching out into the dark dirt of the slums for comfort. He rests his forearms on the green velvet blotter. The fabric is soft and yielding under his weight. He realizes with a quiet and heavy philosophical clarity that absolute power is a deeply isolating force. By demanding absolute perfection and unwavering adoration from his court, he left them absolutely no room for human frailty. When they became afraid, they could not bring their fears to the sun. They had to hide them in the thick, comforting shadows of the night. His brilliant light did not banish the darkness. It merely drove it underground, where it fermented into quiet desperation. The large pendulum clock, standing in the corner of the bedchamber, ticks with a slow, heavy rhythm. The brass weights descend with agonizing slowness, measuring the quiet hours of a monarch realizing his own profound limitations. He cannot legislate the human heart. He cannot command love to remain unchanged any more than he can command the tide to stop breaking against the shore. The realization is a heavy anchor pulling him down into a state of absolute stillness. As the king sits with the heavy burden of his crown, allow yourself to feel the absolute lightness of your own existence in this moment. You have no grand empire to maintain, no complex illusions to protect. You only need to breathe. Let the slow, rhythmic ticking of the night guide you deeper into your pillows, feeling completely safe and wonderfully free from the heavy demands of the waking world. The king slowly shifts his gaze away from the rough ceramic vials, letting his eyes settle upon a heavy crystal goblet resting near the edge of the polished ebony desk. The glass is a masterpiece of artisan craftsmanship, cut with deep, perfect facets that capture the warm, flickering light of the beeswax candles. Inside the heavy vessel rests a small measure of dark ruby wine. The liquid is completely still, a tiny silent pool of deep crimson reflecting the quiet shadows of the royal bedchamber. He reaches out his hand, his skin illuminated softly by the golden glow of the flame, and gently rests his fingertips against the cold crystal. He does not lift the heavy glass to his lips. He merely turns it by a fraction of an inch. The dark wine swirls gently against the sides, leaving a thin, translucent film of red that's slowly weeping back down into the pool. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting sight, an everyday symbol of absolute luxury and refined taste. Yet the heavy silence of the room completely changes the nature of the wine. In his quiet mind, he imagines the pale, chalky powder from the Parisian hovel falling silently into the deep ruby liquid. He imagines the tiny flecks of crushed roots and bitter minerals dissolving completely, leaving absolutely no trace of their existence. The wine would look exactly the same. It would smell of dark berries and ancient oak. It would taste sweet upon the tongue. But hidden perfectly within that sweetness is a desperate, quiet attempt to bind his will. The profound paranoia of absolute power takes a quiet, permanent root. Every grand meal prepared in the vast kitchens, every glass of wine poured by a seemingly loyal servant, and every sweet delicacy offered by a smiling companion is suddenly veiled in a heavy suffocating shadow of doubt. As the king stares into the dark liquid, let your own mind drift away from any lingering doubts. You do not need to analyze the shadows tonight. Allow your eyes to grow heavier, sinking into the absolute comfort of your pillow. Let the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing wash away the waking world, leaving you perfectly safe and entirely at peace. The following day, the grand dining hall of Versailles is filled with the usual morning light, pouring through the massive windows and reflecting off the polished silver platters. The room is bustling with the quiet, efficient movement of attendants who have served the king for many years. They place heavy plates of roasted pheasant, bowls of steamed vegetables, and crystal goblets of wine upon the long, ornate table. The air is warm, filled with the appetizing aroma of herbs and slow-cooked meat. It is a scene of absolute indulgence and comfort, a reflection of the wealth and stability of the French kingdom. King Louis walks to his chair with his customary measured stride. He sits down, the heavy crimson velvet of his coat settling around his shoulders. He looks across the long table at the guests invited to share this meal. They are members of the highest nobility, people whose families have served the crown for generations. They smile at him with open, adoring expressions, their laughter light and effortless. They speak of the morning hunt, the upcoming harvest, and the simple joys of life at court. He watches them with a profound internal detachment. He picks up his silver fork, the weight of the metal familiar and cool in his hand. He touches a piece of perfectly cooked meat, then pauses. A sudden quiet thought anchors his movement. He wonders if this specific dish was prepared in the clean, bright kitchens of the palace, or if it touched the hands of someone seeking to alter his future. He looks at his wine. He considers the laughter of the guests. Every sound, every gesture, and every offer of hospitality is now filtered through a lens of deep, inescapable uncertainty. The king eats very little. He moves the food around his plate with a deliberate, slow motion, creating a perfect visual representation of a meal being consumed. He smiles in return when spoken to, he nods at the right moments, and he maintains the mask of the Sun King with absolute, unwavering discipline. But behind this public facade, he is entirely alone. The paranoia is not a sudden, loud intrusion. It is a quiet, steady companion that sits at the table with him, whispering of hidden threats in the most mundane of places. As he navigates this quiet internal struggle, allow your own day to fade into the background. You do not need to analyze the faces in your own life or question the motives of those around you. You are in a safe, honest space, wrapped in the warmth of your own home. Let the slow, rhythmic breathing of the night soothe your mind. Sink into the soft mattress, feel the absolute security of your surroundings, and let the quiet darkness bring you closer to deep, peaceful sleep. The historical records of the royal physicians describe a quiet shift in the health of the monarch during these years. It was not a sudden illness that confined him to his heavy bed, but rather a persistent, dull shadow that settled directly behind his eyes. On many quiet afternoons, long before the sun began to set, a heavy, rhythmic throbbing would take root in his temples. He would sit in his private chambers, pressing his pale fingers against his forehead, feeling the slow pulse of a profound, unexplainable fatigue. The remedies he unknowingly ingested were never meant to cause absolute harm. They were crafted purely to bind and control, composed of incredibly small amounts of crushed roots and harsh minerals. Over many years, these tiny fractions of dark chemistry accumulated quietly within his body. They manifested as sudden spells of dizziness when he stood up from his ebony desk, or as a strange metallic taste lingering at the back of his throat after a grand banquet. The king simply believed it was the immense weight of the crown pressing down upon him, the sheer physical exhaustion of being the radiant centre of the entire world. He endured the quiet pain with absolute stoicism, masking his physical discomfort just as carefully as he masked his deep emotional isolation. The slow, unseen ache was a physical reflection of the quiet betrayal unfolding entirely in the shadows of his own palace. As we observe his silent struggle with the heavy fatigue of his era, allow your own physical weariness to gently dissolve. You do not carry the toxic burdens of the past. Your body is entirely safe and completely supported by the soft mattress beneath you. Focus on the steady, calming rhythm of your breath. Let any remaining tension in your temples simply melt away, leaving only a profound, peaceful stillness as the quiet night deepens around you. The heavy silence of the royal bedchamber demands a final resolution. King Louis sits before the polished ebony desk, his gaze resting entirely on the thick stack of parchment and folded linen paper. The evidence gathered from the dark, damp holding cells of Paris is absolutely conclusive. If he hands these written confessions over to the public courts, the names of his most intimate companions will be dragged into the unforgiving, blinding light of public scandal. The entire continent of Europe would watch eagerly as the magnificent illusion of Versailles is dismantled, exposing a royal court deeply riddled with dark superstition and quiet desperation. The absolute humiliation would stain the golden legacy of the crown forever. He gently touches the heavy gold signet ring on his finger, feeling the deep, cold engraving of the royal crest. He understands that he is not merely a man who has been quietly betrayed by those he trusted. He is the physical, breathing embodiment of the state itself. He must protect the grand facade of his kingdom at all costs, even if it means carrying the bitter, toxic weight of the truth entirely alone. True power, he realizes in the profound quiet of the midnight hour, is not the ability to violently destroy your enemies. It is the agonizing, rigid discipline required to smile warmly at them while holding the absolute proof of their treason quietly in your hand. The decision solidifies in his mind, becoming as cold and completely unyielding as the marble floor beneath his feet. He will absolutely not allow the common courts to judge the highest, most private peaks of his kingdom. He will force the investigation to a sudden halt. He will silence the creeping whispers of the court. He will become the sole silent keeper of this dark secret, ensuring that the bright, flawless narrative of the Sun King remains completely untarnished in the permanent records of history. As he makes this incredibly heavy, lonely choice in the dark, allow yourself to completely release the need to make any choices at all tonight. Your day is entirely finished. The complex demands of tomorrow are far away and cannot reach you here. Let your physical body sink entirely into the soft comfort of your bed. Focus only on the gentle, soothing rise and fall of your chest, drifting peacefully on the quiet, reliable tide of the night. The king rises slowly from his heavy velvet chair. He gathers the thick stack of linen paper and rough parchment into his hands, feeling the physical weight of the hidden secrets pressing against his palms. He walks with a steady, measured pace toward the grand marble fireplace. The vast hearth holds the deep, glowing orange remains of a large oak fire. The heat radiates outward, a dry, comforting warmth that gently brushes against the cold silk of his dressing gown. He reaches for a heavy iron poker resting on the stone hearth. He gently turns the largest burning log. A sudden shower of bright orange sparks floats upward into the dark chimney, and a fresh, vibrant yellow flame immediately springs to life, casting long shadows across the room. He sets the iron tool down. The metal clinks softly against the stone, a deeply grounding sound of absolute finality. He takes the first sheet of delicate linen paper, the page bearing the elegant indigo script and the terrifying name of his favourite companion. He holds the edge of the document closely above the dancing flame. The intense heat causes the high-quality paper to instantly warp and curl inward. He releases his grip. The paper drops silently into the heart of the fire. The bright flame catches the dry fibres in a single heartbeat. The elegant letters and the cold alchemical formulas glow brilliantly white for a fraction of a second before turning entirely black. The heavy parchment of the official police transcripts follows. The cured animal hide does not burn quickly. It resists the fire, curling tightly onto itself and emitting a low rhythmic crackling sound. A thick ribbon of grey smoke rises into the chimney, carrying the heavy scent of burning leather and fading truth. He feeds the flames methodically, dropping page after page into the consuming heat, acting as the silent executioner of history. As the evidence turns into fragile, weightless ash, let your own worries dissolve completely. Allow the gentle, rhythmic crackling of the fire to lull your mind into a state of total rest. You are entirely safe. Sink deeply into the warmth of your bed, feeling the soft blankets surrounding you, and drift peacefully into the quiet night. The final sheet of heavy parchment curls completely into itself, offering a last brief flare of bright yellow light before collapsing into a fragile pile of pale grey ash. King Louis stands perfectly still before the grand marble hearth, watching the embers pulse with a deep dying orange glow. The physical evidence of the greatest betrayal in the history of his reign is entirely gone, erased from the world as if it had never existed. The air in the vast bedchamber carries the distinct bitter scent of burnt paper, a temporary ghost that will vanish completely by morning, swept away by the fresh air of the meticulous palace servants. He turns away from the warmth of the fading fire. The absolute weight of the truth still resides heavily within his own mind, a solitary burden he will carry until the end of his days, but the magnificent, golden facade of Versailles remains perfectly intact. He walks slowly toward his enormous, heavily canopy bed. The thick silk curtains hang motionless, guarding a quiet sanctuary completely isolated from the terrifying realities of the world outside. He climbs onto the high mattress, the soft feathers yielding instantly to his exhausted weight. He pulls the heavy velvet blankets up to his chest, staring up into the deep absolute darkness of the canopy above. The Sun King, having successfully protected his radiant empire by embracing the shadows, finally closes his heavy eyes. The dark secrets of the French court are now permanently buried in ash and silence. They cannot reach you, and they cannot disturb your peace. As the great palace of Versailles settles into its final, deepest hours of sleep, allow yourself to completely surrender to the night. Your own journey is over for the day. Let the quiet darkness wrap around you like a heavy, comforting blanket. Breathe in slowly, exhale all remaining tension, and let your mind drift away into a completely dreamless, profound, and restorative sleep. The final hours of the night stretch quietly over the sprawling estate of Versailles. The bitter scent of burnt parchment has completely dissipated, replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of natural beeswax and sweet cedar. The vast palace is submerged in a profound, uninterrupted silence. It is the deep, restorative quiet that comes just before the dawn, a temporary suspension of all worldly demands. The grand illusion of the court rests peacefully, entirely secure in its golden facade. Outside the tall windows, a cold silver mist rolls slowly across the geometric gardens. It moves like a gentle, pale ocean, softening the rigid edges of the perfectly pruned trees and the sharp gravel pathways. The heavy marble statues are wrapped up in this soft floating veil. Nature quietly reclaims the landscape, temporarily blurring the lines between reality and royal illusion. The world is completely still, holding its breath before the sun rises to demand another day of brilliant performance. But for now, the sun remains hidden far below the horizon. There is absolutely no need for light, no need for action, and no need to maintain any appearances. The complex secrets of the past are locked away forever, turned to weightless dust and swept into the ashes of history. They hold absolutely no power in this peaceful hour. The heavy burdens of kings and courtiers have vanished completely into the dark. As the silver mist blankets the quiet world outside, let a soft, comforting fog settle gently over your own mind. The story has ended, leaving behind only a profound sense of calm. You have journeyed through the shadows and returned entirely safe. Sink deeper into the absolute warmth of your bed. Let the steady, rhythmic sound of your own slow breathing become your only focus. Allow the quiet peace of this final hour to carry you smoothly and deeply into a perfect, unbroken sleep. The vast palace of Versailles has entirely surrendered to the night. Deep within its stone walls, the rhythmic breathing of 1,000 sleeping souls merges into a single quiet heartbeat. There are no more grand declarations, no whispered plots in the damp alleys of Paris, and no heavy gold coins changing hands. The entire kingdom is perfectly equal in this state of profound rest. The absolute monarch and the quietest servant share the exact same sanctuary of sleep, completely detached from the complex roles they play during the day. The sky above the grand gardens remains a deep velvet black. The stars shine with a soft, distant light, completely indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath them. They have witnessed centuries of rising and falling empires, knowing that every grand structure eventually returns to silence. Their pale, ancient light filters softly through the heavy mist, creating a gentle, luminous ceiling over the sleeping world. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting reminder of the vastness of time and the absolute insignificance of our daily worries. You are a vital part of this quiet, sleeping world. The physical boundaries of your room, the soft fabric of your blankets, and the gentle rhythm of your breathing are the only realities that matter right now. Every thought, every memory of the day, and every anticipation of tomorrow has completely dissolved into the dark, comforting mist. You are entirely untethered from the waking world, floating freely in absolute peace. As the final echoes of the past fade completely into the silent void, allow yourself to sink even deeper. Let the darkness behind your closed eyes become a soft, welcoming space. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to see, and nothing left to hear. Drift away now, completely safe, completely calm, and entirely at rest in the deep, quiet embrace of the night. The grand historical tapestry we have woven together tonight is now completely folded away. The heavy velvet curtains of the past are drawn shut, and the stage is entirely empty. You are no longer an observer of history. You are simply a physical body resting perfectly in the present moment. The vast, echoing halls of Versailles and the damp, narrow streets of Paris have faded away into a soft, formless grey mist at the very edge of your mind. They require absolutely no more of your attention. Here, in your own quiet space, there is only the gentle, predictable rhythm of your own existence. Notice the absolute stillness of the air around you. It is a protective, comforting barrier that separates you from the busy, waking world outside your door. The only movement is the slow, steady rise and fall of your chest, a natural tide that washes away the very last traces of lingering tension. With every slow exhale, you sink a fraction of an inch deeper into the soft, yielding support of your mattress. The darkness in your room is not empty. It is deeply restorative. It is a heavy, warm blanket that wraps around your shoulders, offering complete, unconditional comfort. Allow the tiny muscles around your eyes to fully relax. Let your jaw unclench entirely. Feel the heavy, pleasant weight in your arms and your legs, as if they are gently tethered to the center of the earth. You are completely grounded, yet your mind is entirely free to drift on the quiet, formless currents of the night. There is absolutely nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to achieve. The transition from waking to sleeping is a natural, effortless surrender. Let the quiet shadows carry you softly across the threshold. Embrace the absolute silence, trust in the deep comfort of your bed, and let the gentle embrace of sleep hold you completely until the morning comes.